Welcome to Casual Chat Live. I'm Brian Germain, and I've got a very special guest, David Ames. Welcome, David.
Welcome. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's great. It's really, I've been wanting to do something like this with you for a long, long time because, I mean, you've been studying stuff for ages that is very relevant for, especially for the skydivers and other adventure enthusiasts out there. Your body is a piece of equipment. You know, you got to keep your parachute in good condition. You know, you got to keep your kayak in good condition or anything else, your mountain bike, but your body's the weakest link at the bottom end, right?
For sure.
So just tell us sort of a little bit, just briefly about your angle on it that maybe is a little distinct from other folks that you know, they say, oh, I'm a personal trainer or whatever, but you're obviously much more than that.
Yeah. I got really interested in health and fitness when I was working as a paramedic. And I was working in a major trauma center in Miami. And when I was in the area of the emergency room where people were there for medical reasons. The place was so big that it was split between physical injuries and medical. And I was in the medical area, and such a huge percentage of the people that were there for things that were preventable.
Yeah. And
though I see, you know, I completely understand the value of emergency medicine and traditional Western medical treatments, I decided that I wanted to focus more on helping people to not get sick or to get better rather than trying to treat them once they were already quite sick.
Yeah, and injured as well, right?
And injured as well, for sure. I've certainly worked with a lot of people once their medical insurance ran out and they weren't covered to go to physical therapy anymore. Mm-hmm. And I would, you know, work with them and bridge the gap between the physical therapy and just a standard exercise regimen. Mm-hmm. You know, so, you know, health, fitness, nutrition, it all goes together.
Yeah.
And so what I'd like to do is to start off by defining a few terms. And the first is to define the word exercise. Exercise is an activity that is designed for improving your fitness, whether it be strength or endurance or the crossover between the two, which exists. Yeah. And it has to be something that's measurable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hiking, mountain biking, tennis is not, in my personal opinion, exercise. Mm-hmm. They are vigorous activities. They take a tremendous toll on you energetically. But unless you are really doing it in such a way that it is measurable, mm-hmm. like you're biking the same route with a bicycle computer so that you can measure the pace and have a heart rate monitor so that you know how hard you're working, just going out on a hard bike ride or a hard hike is not what I would consider exercise. That's not to diminish its value, because it has tremendous value, both physically, spiritually, and in every other way. Oh, yeah. But when you're talking about doing something from the standpoint of trying to improve your fitness, mm-hmm. like I said, whether that be cardiovascular fitness or strength or something like that, it has to be an activity that is measurable.
Yeah. Well, of course, I mean, you can measure the number of skydives. You know, you can measure the distance that you traveled on when you're hiking or whatever. Obviously, you could calculate roughly the calories burned, maybe.
Yeah, but the calories burned is really not what's relevant. What's relevant is how much of a physical stress was put on your body, mm-hmm. and was it more or less than the last time you did that activity, and how much more or less was it?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, when you're lifting weights, it's very easy to say, I lifted 50 pounds last time. I'm lifting 55 pounds this time. I've increased the resistance by 10%, right. Assuming that you keep everything else constant.
Yeah.
And so, the scientific term for lifting weights is actually progressive resistance exercise. And the reason is because it is supposed to be progressive. So that you're slowly increasing over time. Mm-hmm. And the literature states when you're looking at any kind of exercise, there are 3 factors that can be altered. You can change the duration, the frequency, or the intensity. Mm-hmm. And what you want to be doing, basically, is to do a little bit more than last week.
Yeah.
If you did nothing last week, then anything is more than nothing. And if you do more than a little bit, more week after week, and you try to increase too quickly, you're going to get sick or injured, or you're going to quit. Yeah. It's just not sustainable.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So, whether your goal is to become a bodybuilder or it's to just become stronger so that when you carry your groceries in from your car, or you're a power lifter, or, whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, having some type of a plan set up in advance so that you know what you're doing when you go to exercise is crucial. You can't just wing it.
Yeah. One of the things that you've taught me that really stuck with me is that to prepare for most sporting events, to do the activity, you can't really consider that to be the conditioning preparation. Really, you got to do something that's more of a holistic, well-rounded, balanced exercise program.
Yes.
Which includes, of course, stretching, strength training,
cardiovascular training, all of that. And, it's really only athletes at the highest level that need to be doing very specific strength and conditioning things to improve their performance in their sport. I coach a college varsity team, actually 2, because it's a men's and a women's. And, we have a strength and conditioning coach at the college. The guy has a master's degree and knows unbelievable amounts. And probably 95% of what he does for all the varsity athletes, regardless of the team, is identical. And, his philosophy, which makes a lot of sense, is I've never heard a coach tell me that their player developed too much power, regardless of the sport, right? If you're playing volleyball, how high you can jump, how hard you can spike the ball, that's power. How fast you can sprint, how fast you can change direction, whatever it is, it's all about power.
And control of power, I think, is also relevant.
Yes, of course. And that's about body awareness and using good technique in your training.
Right.
So, that's certainly important. But yes, in terms of, if you decide that you want to become a better tennis player, well, nothing is going to substitute for going out and taking lessons with a tennis pro and learning the skills of tennis better. But what happens is you end up with this kind of leapfrog approach where, there's somebody who's better than you. And so you become better at the sport, and then you want to get to the next level and you need to get fitter. And then you need to get better, and then you need to get fitter, and then you need to get better. And just getting a lot fitter or just getting a lot better is not going to help you. It has to be this kind of, synergistic increases as you work your way up.
Right. And of course, a lot of our viewers are skydivers. And I know I didn't really take a close look at the physical strength and flexibility component until I got a little bit older. And when I started competing more, and I realized that I was butting my head up against this limitation called my physical body's ability. Even though my mind would sometimes want to do it, I couldn't physically do that.
Yes.
So in terms of, let's take canopy skills. So I can teach somebody how to fly their parachute. And I say, well, when you're flaring, this is the motion, and those are specific muscle groups that need to be addressed, obviously, in the conditioning program. But I do see folks that they just jump on the weekends. They don't do anything very physical during the week. And it's holding them back because they can't physically pull the toggles down fast enough, especially on a big parachute where there's a lot of toggle pressure, where they can't make that canopy level off when they want to. And they end up mushing in, you know how it is, where they don't quite level off. And they blame the parachute and they blame themselves for poor technique. But actually, in this case, it wasn't about technique. It was about a limitation of their power.
Yeah. I'd say from my experience, what I have seen with a lot of skydivers is just very poor body awareness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you see someone in free fall and they're constantly spinning to the left.
Yeah.
And they just don't realize that one of their shoulders is higher than the other because they don't have the body awareness to do it, or their feet, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I certainly, that was always my problem, is I was never aware enough of my feet.
Yeah.
Were my legs straight? Were my legs bent? You
didn't invent that. Yeah, you did not invent that.
No, I'm sure I didn't.
Everybody goes
through it. I didn't. Yeah. So, certainly doing things like yoga.
Yes.
Especially yoga in front of a mirror so that you can be looking at yourself. I mean, certainly the best case scenario is having a, one-on-one yoga with an instructor who's walking all the way around the mat, looking at you from every angle and pointing out things that you're missing.
Yeah.
But there's also a feedback that happens when you're seeing it yourself. And there's a certain amount of when you're on your mat where you can look at your body, but when you have mirrors and then you can turn the mat 90 degrees and look at the mirror from a different angle and you can see that, you develop the body awareness. I developed it a lot growing up when I was lifting weights, looking in the mirror, because you develop the links between your brain and your nervous system and your muscles and seeing the muscles contract. The simplest thing is if you say to somebody, contract your bicep, and you're squeezing your bicep, that's relatively easy for a person to do.
Yeah.
But now you say, okay, now I want you to contract your tricep and squeeze your tricep.
Mm-hmm.
Any muscle on the back of your body, people don't have a link with generally because they can't see it. You can develop it over time, but it's not something that is second nature to most people. And in skydiving, when you're arching, having that consciousness of contracting the muscles in your lower back, contracting the muscles in your upper back so that your shoulders are pulling back, developing the flexibility in your pectoral muscles to open up, which most people don't have because they spend so much time sitting at a computer or driving and they're hunched forward.
Right.
And having that tightness in your pectoral muscles is really exceptionally counterproductive to forming a good arch in skydiving.
Sure.
So having that flexibility in the front of your body and the consciousness in the back of your body to contract and get yourself into that arch and then holding it without exhausting yourself are all crucial to maintaining a good body position in a standard arch position. And then of course, if you're doing free flying and you're talking about sit flying or standing or head down, the body mechanics of all of those positions, dictate different muscle groups and awareness of different muscle groups. And that's why something like yoga and Pilates and gyro training and gymnastics and things like that, where you're really moving your body in all different directions is so helpful.
Yeah. I like swimming as well. I find it's extremely helpful.
Yeah. Swimming is great. It's wonderful because it's almost impossible to hurt yourself swimming.
Unless you drown. Yeah.
Unless you drown. You can certainly, if you overdo it, hurt your shoulders. But in general, it's a great exercise because there's so little wear and tear on your body.
So you touched on something there, shoulders. So, of course, you've been helping me with ongoing shoulder maintenance exercises, rotator cuff in particular. And I noticed I'm not the only one in the sport that deals with shoulder pain that kind of flares up and then comes back. And it's sort of always there. It's just sometimes I don't notice it because it's not hurting right now.
Right.
And then I let myself get weak. And
the shoulder issue is not just an issue for skydivers. It's epidemic in our society, in large part because of what I was saying, because we spend so much time inwardly rotating. And when you're inwardly rotated, the humerus is literally not at the right angle into your shoulder socket. And over time, the muscles in your pectoral muscles, your chest muscles, the anterior deltoid, the front of your shoulder muscles, your biceps get tight.
Yeah.
In addition, most people, especially ego-driven men who go to the gym to lift weights, what do they focus on? Bench press and curls.
Yeah.
Both of which are internal rotators.
Beach muscles.
The beach muscles, but they're really not. People say they're beach muscles, but if you really want to look on the beach, what do you want? You want big, wide shoulders and a narrow waist. You don't want a big chest and big biceps because that just looks funny.
Yeah.
Anyway, my point is that we need to do things to balance that out.
Right.
And what we need to do to balance that out is be stretching the pectorals and strengthening the upper back.
Right.
And also just being conscious of our body position when we're doing things like sitting at a computer and driving. And that's getting our shoulders back.
Yeah.
The simplest exercise for that is to just lay on the ground and work on getting your scapula, your shoulder blades flat on the floor.
Mm-hmm. Not as easy as it sounds.
It should be. I guarantee you that both of your sons can do it with no problem.
Yeah.
Because they're young and they haven't developed this. But for most of us, it is not easy. I'm sitting here now, cross-legged on the floor with my back against the wall, constantly pushing my shoulders back so that my chest is open and my shoulders are back and my shoulder blades are flat against the wall. My sacrum is flat against the wall. My lumbar spine has a slight forward curve in it, and that puts my back in the correct orientation. But most people don't do that. So, when you're sitting, make sure your butt is all the way back in your seat. Make sure that your shoulder blades are back and get your elbows at your sides when you're typing. Don't lean forward and type like this because all of that just completely destroys your alignment.
Yeah.
So,
close to you, keeping the computer close enough to you. It's funny, as you were saying, it just kind of reminded me of when we're climbing, you often find yourself reaching for a hold that's a little beyond you, and it creates this imbalance, like reaching forward to pick up a garbage can in front of you and, my back hurts, or shoveling snow because you're not keeping the weight close to you.
Yes.
Right.
And the climbing analogy works because if you take a ladder and lean it up against your house, you're never up here. Your hands are here and you're just bringing your feet up. Yeah. And in a perfect world, that's the way you climb. You don't climb by doing pull-ups like this. You climb by bringing your feet up and standing on them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, to backtrack to where we were talking about, the epidemic of shoulder problems comes from improper alignment of your shoulders and comes from internal rotation, overworking, or just tightening of the muscles that internally rotate your shoulders, which destroy the integrity of the shoulder. So the solution to that is to be opening up the muscles that internally rotate, which are predominantly,
so leaning against the door and rotating this way.
Yes. Right. Lengthening the distance between your sternum and the front of your shoulder, opening up this way. Then also opening up with a straight arm so that you're also lengthening the bicep.
Got it.
With the palm down. Because the bicep rotates the palm up, supinates the hand, and flexes the arm. So the opposite of the action of the muscle would be to pronate the hand and extend the arm, and that is what allows you to lengthen the bicep. So both of those things will help to stretch that out. Then strengthening the muscles in your upper back, which is simply done by pulling.
Right.
A seated pull, whether it's with some kind of a machine or a TRX suspension trainer, which is a phenomenal piece of equipment, which you can get knockoffs for about $30 now. And it's just using your body weight. You clip a carabiner onto something, grab two handles and pull, which is great. And you can change the angle to make it harder or easier. It was developed by the Special Forces because they needed to be able to exercise when they were out in the field and they didn't have lots of equipment.
Yep.
And then if you really have rotator cuff problems, to be working on the external rotation exercises.
Yeah. Talk more about that, because there's a lot of finer points about that, how to do it correctly. and not rely on big muscle groups to mask the fact that your actual rotator cuff muscle or supportive muscles are wimpy.
Well, if you're laying on, let's say, your left side, and you have a dumbbell in your right hand, and your elbow is against your side, usually you need some kind of a cushion in there to hold it, and your arm is at 90 degrees, and then you rotate your elbow out.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to cheat.
Yeah. If your elbow is against your body.
Against your body, or maybe with like a folded up towel in there. And that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
No, just because, depending on your body, you want your elbow roughly below your shoulder. You can do it with a cable, if you're standing up and the cable is coming from that direction.
Yeah.
Everybody see that? So the cable will be coming from over there, and
you're pulling.
And I'm rotating this way.
Right.
So whether I'm laying on this side or I'm standing up with a cable coming from the opposite direction, I'm rotating out.
Gotcha.
Don't waste your time doing the internal rotations, because the internal rotators are always too strong anyway. So, that's something. So it's the external rotation. There's also an external rotation done with a straight arm. Now, this one is a lot easier to cheat. Yes. So you want to keep the motion in your shoulder joint, not in your shoulder blade. If your scapula starts moving, you're using the big muscles in the center of your back, your trapezius, your rhomboids, your latissimus dorsi, all of those big muscles. Your brain, whenever you do any kind of exercise, your brain wants to find a way to make it easier.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to work a small muscle group, your brain is unconsciously going to be trying to recruit big muscle groups to make it easier. So you have to override that impulse when you're doing these and just be using these small muscle groups.
Yeah.
And, the reality is most people, when they start doing external rotation, if you're doing more than about 5 pounds, you're doing it wrong.
That's a lot for me.
Yeah.
A 5 pound weight, especially when my shoulder is achy, forget about it. Half the time when I'm actually starting to feel pain, I need to start with just the weight of my arm. That's enough.
Yeah.
And then after a few days, it starts to feel a little bit stronger, and then I add, a pound.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the difficult part with those light weights is that, ideally speaking, what you'd like to be doing is increasing the weight by 5 or 10%.
Yeah.
How do you take a 3 pound weight and increase that by 10%? You can't. So you have to just go slower and do a couple extra reps and work your way up till you can go from a 2.5 or a 3 pound weight to a 5.
Yeah.
There are some companies that make these magnetic weights that you can stick to a dumbbell to increase the weight by a small amount, but almost nobody has them.
Yeah.
And it's really not that necessary. I'm not a big fan of the resistance bands.
You're not?
No.
Because we use them around here quite a lot.
Yeah. And the reason
harness, right? We use them in the hanging harness for
right. Well, I mean, it's good to simulate resistance in a hanging harness. Yeah. The problem with the resistance bands, in my personal feeling, is that the further the stretch, the higher the resistance is.
Right.
When you do an external rotation, the further you rotate, the weaker you get.
Interesting.
So as you're getting weaker, the resistance is getting heavier. That doesn't work. So what you end up having to do is use the wrong resistance. There's something called the strength curve.
Yeah.
It changes depending on the muscle group. And what it is that during different phases of the range of motion, you're stronger and weaker. The whole idea around the whole Nautilus craze from like the 70s and the 80s was that the Nautilus cam was supposed to simulate the strength curve and change the resistance as your strength varies in that range of motion. Mm-hmm. The problem is that the reality is that every muscle has a different strength curve. Not only each muscle, but each muscle in a different exercise. So a tricep extension over your head has a different strength curve than a tricep kickback, than a tricep press down, and your strength curve might be different than mine. But the fact remains that it is virtually impossible that the resistance bands are going to mimic the strength curve.
Makes sense.
So, my preference is to be using whenever possible for exercise, to be using your body weight.
Yeah.
But obviously that's not feasible for certain exercises.
Yeah,
if you're not strong enough to do a pull-up,
yeah,
you can't do pull-ups. So you need to do, a lat pull-down machine.
Yeah. Or, I mean, we have rigged it up with TheraBands or something similar to assist with pull-ups.
Yes, there are ways to do that. So you can have a person assist you. You can do negative only pull-ups, because
negative only.
Yeah, there's the positive phase and the negative phase of any exercise. The positive phase is when you're fighting gravity and moving away from the ground. So a pull-up, the positive phase is here. The negative phase is lowering yourself. We're all substantially stronger in the negative phase. So you can take a person who can't do a pull-up, put a chair in front of a pull-up bar, have them hold on here and lower themselves as slowly as they can to a straight arm, then stand back up on the chair and just lower themselves back down.
Interesting.
And, virtually anybody can do that to some varying degree, even if they can't do one pull-up. And if you do negative only long enough, you will eventually build up the strength to do the positive part, or the concentric as opposed to the eccentric, which is the technical terms.
Fancy.
The fancy names for positive and negative.
It's just words. Now, the other thing that I noticed skydivers suffer from a lot is knee issues. So are there things that we can do to support the knee? Obviously, it's mostly about landings, so to reduce the risk of an injury and a landing where you schmuck in.
Yeah, don't downsize too quickly.
There's that. Yeah. Certainly maintaining adequate strength in your legs, maintaining adequate flexibility in your body is all going to help. A lot of people, when they are learning especially, or they're afraid, one of your favorite topics, tense up. Yeah.
If you tense up right before you land, it's a recipe for disaster.
For sure.
So if you're really loose and do your proper PLF, assuming you botch the landing, you should be fine.
Yeah.
But in terms of actually strengthening the joint, it's something that is not particularly feasible. You can strengthen the muscles above and below a joint, like the knee, because there's not a lot of muscle around the knee joint itself, because it's a hinge. The hip and the shoulder, which are ball and socket joints, have muscles that surround them. Yeah. But the knee really doesn't. So strengthening the quadricep and the hamstring and the abductors and the adductors, and maintaining, good flexibility in those muscles is all going to help. Yeah. But lots of pounding, whether it's running or aerobics or hard landings. Yeah.
The cartilage issues. And of course, then you've got, the ligaments.
Right.
Once they get stretched, it seems to me that as a result of a moment of poor conditioning combined with poor technique and resistance, fighting it, this, moment of self-aggression, I can't believe I blew the flare again, or hooked too low again.
Or you're just nervous about blowing the flare, so you tense up and tighten everything up and hit really hard. Yep. Your legs are designed to be shock absorbers. That's what they're designed to do. Yeah. And that's been actually one of the big trends in the last 15 years or so in terms of running, is getting people not to land on their heels, because that's not normal. When you watch a small child run, how do they run? They run on their toes, because then you have the flexibility in your ankles in addition to your knees. And that's why people who run with good technique can literally run barefoot and not get injured.
I suddenly had a realization is that when we see people landing that haven't done a canopy course or really good coaching with somebody, they've got their chest strap tight when they flare their back on their heels, right? When they flare, so the first footprint down is going to be a heel impact, which is harder on the body.
Much.
I've been in, or the coccyx bone, which is a whole other thing. I don't know what you can do to prevent injury there other than don't do that. But the loosening of the chest strap, the flaring slightly behind you, pushing the chest forward, now I'm able to land, as you say, a little bit closer to the front of my foot in my first point of contact instead of my heel.
Right. So if you can get people to not be afraid of face planting, that works.
I still haven't seen anybody get hurt by a face plant.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying it's rational. I'm saying that people are going to be afraid of it happening. Well, not that it's actually going to happen.
Absolutely. But it's fun to watch. Yeah. But you see my point, of course, that the pitch attitude of the body when finally interfacing with the planet is very significant. It's not just to look cool in the picture.
Yes. And certainly if you're landing more on your toes and having not just your knees taking up the shock, but your ankles and your hips and your whole body, if you're spreading out that impact, it's a lot less wear and tear. There
you go. Well, I hadn't actually put all of that together until this moment.
Yes. So. And there's, there's a concept that is being promoted called chi running. Mm-hmm. Where you're basically leaning forward, and they're saying that running is a controlled fall, mm-hmm. and you're never reaching your foot out in front of you. Right. Your legs go out behind you, and all you're doing is leaning forward into it and preventing yourself from falling by bringing your feet down and landing on your toes and just rolling. As opposed to, if you think about it, if you're heel striking, you're literally slowing yourself down. Why would you want to land on your heels when you're running? Mm-hmm. It makes no sense. And scientifically, when they've done studies of the physics of running, you could have 3 inches of padding in your running shoes. It's mm-hmm. not going to be enough to handle the impact of running. It's just not possible. And so, it's something that, people are finally realizing that they need instruction in how to run. People will get instruction in lots of sports, but how many people do you know got instruction on how the mechanics of running? No. Not many. And the reality is you want to learn how to run, go to the playground and watch little kids.
Right.
They do it right, instinctively.
They know. Yeah.
They know, especially if they weren't forced into rigid shoes by their parents at a young age.
Yeah. Yeah. My kids are barefoot a lot. As a matter of fact, when it's warm enough, we even climb barefoot.
Yeah.
But it depends on the rock. But for outdoor stuff, there's no rule that you can't take your shoes off. At the gym, they're going to require shoes. But it's neat to watch how they change the way that they walk. They change the way. There's a lot of folks that are in support of that idea. And you see those weird toesy shoes, where you have to work your toes.
Yeah. The Vibram 5 fingers.
Yeah,
I love.
So you think it's a good thing, yeah?
Well, I think the only problem with them is if you take somebody who's 20, 25, 30, 35 years old, who's been wearing shoes their whole life, mm-hmm. and then put them into those, mm-hmm. You can end up with injuries.
Yeah.
And so, it's something that you need to break into slowly. You can't just go from 0 to 100 overnight.
Yeah. Wear them around the house.
There are all kinds of minimalist shoes out now that are, certainly not so weird looking. Mm-hmm. But not having your heel up on a platform with your toes below your heel, which is not proper body mechanics, is a good thing. Having your heel at the level of your toe, or mm-hmm. more mimicking how it would be if you were barefoot. Makes a lot of sense.
Well, yeah, and as a mountaineer, I notice, I'm sure you do too, that the uphill is not the time where you tend to get the injuries. It's the downhill, right?
Well, my philosophy for downhill was always don't try to slow down.
Yes. Let the acceleration happen.
Right. Lean forward and just roll with it, because otherwise you're leaning back and jamming your heel into the trail all the way down.
Right.
I realized that when I was about 15 years old, hiking in Yosemite.
Yeah.
The last 2 miles of the trail was paved because it was where all the tourists went. So I had hiked like 15 miles, and the last 2 miles with a backpack, the last 2 miles on paved tourist trails, I was very inexperienced. And when I got to the bottom, I literally fell down and couldn't walk.
Yeah.
I was wearing big, heavy-duty hiking boots, mm-hmm. With minimal padding and thick, heavy Vibram soles like they used to tell us to all wear. Mm-hmm. And my knees it was the first time in my life my knees ever hurt.
Yeah.
And I learned after that, lean forward and go with it.
Yeah. Yeah, there it is. That's a good one.
And you know, zigzag.
Yeah, exactly.
And use the terrain to slow you down rather than, you know, jamming your heels down and leaning back and having that jarring shock.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting that when, you know, when I was a paramedic, one of the things they talked about, and this is obviously not a pleasant conversation, but if someone decides to jump off something high to damage themselves,
yes,
or by accident, when they land on their heels, they frequently break their back.
Interesting.
Because of the impact force that goes all the way up.
Yeah. There you go.
So, you know, that's, you know, I mean, whether it's repetitive impact from years of running or years of hiking or years of skydiving or one very serious, you know, unintentional fall, it can cause tremendous damage to your body.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've got on one hand technique in terms of walking, running, lifting, right? I mean, how do you lift your rig? How do you, how do you execute your whole landing process? And then we come back to this idea of conditioning as a primary prevention tool. The knowledge and the skill, to me, is a primary prevention tool.
Absolutely.
And yeah, when you take something like skydiving, kayaking, paragliding, mountain biking, skiing, the doing of the activity is a lot more fun, and in most cases less painful than the preparation, you know, in terms of conditioning. And people avoid things that are not as much fun. They avoid things that are physically painful, and exercise doesn't always feel awesome.
Yes.
And I notice myself where this laziness comes in that becomes my real enemy.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the people that are most susceptible to all of this are the weekend warriors.
Yeah.
The people that are really serious about any of those activities fully understand how important it is to do things other than that for conditioning. But the people that are going out and, you know, doing a long mountain bike ride on a Saturday after sitting behind a desk from Monday through Friday, and then they can't understand why they can't walk for 4 days afterwards, you know, and it's all they do is try to make up for a lack of activity during the week by doing extra on the weekends is just not going to work. Right. And the interesting fact is that there have been new studies out where they compared somebody, let's say like a male person who walks and delivers mail. They've compared that person who that's all they do. They don't ever exercise or go to the gym. They've compared that person to the person that has a desk job and religiously goes to the gym for an hour or two a day. The mail carrier is healthier. The new recommendations say that the maximum time we should spend sitting per day is 3 hours a day.
Right.
Because sitting is the new smoking. Sitting is horrible.
Yeah.
It reduces the circulation in your body of blood, of lymph, of, you know, nervous impulses. It tightens up your hip flexors. And the problems that we were talking about in your shoulder also exist in your hips. That you know, instead of having your lower body below your upper body, they're here. So the muscles that overlap the front of your hip joint shorten. And you see people that walk around with their butt sticking out. Yeah. It's because those muscles have gotten tight.
Uncle Leo. Uncle Leo.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. or women that wear high heels all the time.
Not healthy, yeah.
Not healthy because it throws off their equilibrium. So they have to stick their butt out to compensate. And they end up with this instead of this.
Right. So
and why is it that it's so hard to stand on your hands?
Because our body posture has been training to be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you look at the specialists on the internet who specialize in hand balancing.
Yeah.
And when they're doing this, whether they're standing on their hands or standing on their feet, it looks the same. And they have that alignment. And I'm sure that when you're doing head down or stand up in free flying, it's the same thing. When things get out of whack, you lose control.
Yep.
And so maintaining the proper alignment in your shoulders and your hips is crucial. You know, they talk about the problems that everybody's going to have in their neck and upper back from doing this.
Yeah.
And texting all day long.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're not just doing this, but you're doing this.
Neck problems and thumb problems. That's
right.
what I see for the millennials.
The crunching in the trapezius muscles.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that sticks with me that you've said, and every yoga instructor I've ever said, is do the opposite of what you've been doing.
It's a little unspecific, but it's true.
Right? I mean, yoga as a principle is if you exercise this way, go this way, you go that way, you go that way, and you go, well, what's the counterpose to my life? You know, to my sewing, my driving, you know, what, and so that way, if I work the both angles and, you know, extending this side and strengthening this side, as you say, when I go into something that is for fun, because to me, my conditioning there has to be a meaning behind it, other than I would like to be a healthy old guy, which I do want to be, but I want to be a healthy adventure old guy that does stuff, you know, that still climbs mountains, that's still skiing in my 80s.
Yeah.
So how do I do that? I think this is a big piece.
You have to stay healthy. And, you know, and that brings up a good point. You know, when you're 20 years old, if you get hurt like you did, you can bounce back.
Yep.
The problem is the older you get, the less you bounce back. So it becomes really crucial for us as we get older to not get hurt, which means we have to be more conscious and more aware. And we have to be, you know, making sure that we're not making bad choices, because one of those bad choices can cause, you know, a problem for the rest of your life that you can't recover from at 30 or 40 or 50. My beautiful daughter, Maddie.
Yeah, come and say hi to the entire world, Maddie.
Hello, entire world.
We're live online.
We're live online.
Which injury is that?
My hand.
So Maddie's a dancer.
Yes, she is.
Maddie is actually an incredible dancer.
Oh, and here's my other daughter, who just left.
And so Maddie, so you deal with pain from dancing. I'm curious if, like, your dad, I assume, teaches you stuff, exercise programs that are not about dancing, it's about conditioning. I mean, are you doing
I try to.
Yeah, your kids always listen.
That I'm supposed to do to make my injuries better, but I don't do.
Okay. Well, I mean, as you get older, you listen to the people.
Well, and this is the perfect example. You know, when you're young, you can bounce back from things.
Yeah.
You know, hopefully.
No.
But
not me.
if you give it the adequate amount of rest and rehabilitation and take care of it.
I've had a sprained ankle for 4 years.
You have, but you didn't adequately rest and rehab it.
Aha.
So, you know, and you push your body, you know, 20 hours a week, which is a lot for anybody.
Well, there you go. And I think it's one of the things we talked about this earlier is having a sort of loving kindness approach to your body. And your mind has this will. I want to dance. I want to skydive. I want to fly in the wind tunnel infinitely because I love it. You know, at what point do I weigh my will to participate in this activity against my desire to have, you know, a body that doesn't hurt?
Yeah. And, you know, what it really, in my opinion, comes down to is that we have to be, we have to plan. We have to be conscious and strategic about our exercise.
Yeah.
You know, and this brings up one of the topics that I wanted to mention is that you can only do exercise that you're capable of recuperating from. Our bodies do not change during exercise.
Yeah. It's the healing.
They change in response to the exercise. And the reason it changes is because your body wants it to be easy.
Yeah.
So, you know, your body is trying to make whatever you were pushing it to do easy. And the way to do that is to become stronger or fitter or whatever it is. And so you progressively increase it. But we have to make sure that we can recuperate from it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of factors to that, but the most important factor is, or the two most important factors is proper planning so that you're not pushing too hard, too frequently, and to create the optimal environment within your body so that you can heal. And that is all about the proper nutrition, macronutrients, micronutrients, rest, relaxation, healing. Oh, hundreds at least.
Really?
No.
Green smoothies, baby.
No, I'm just curious.
There's a lot more to.
He's recording it.
Yeah.
Also, in addition to live.
So basically, Maddie, you're gonna be on YouTube again.
Woo! Again.
Woo-hoo! So I mean, the green smoothie in that sort of thing, sort of what do they call the micronutrients and superfoods? That is very significant. To me. I mean, you've been teaching me a heck of a lot of this stuff, but
yes,
there's just such a massive volume of information to support the fact that humans are not eating that well. That we're actually obesely starving to death.
Yes, we are calorically rich and nutriently deficient.
Right.
And unfortunately, what most people do when they decide they're going to be healthy is eat the same food and just eat less of it. So they're eating less nutritionally deficient food. Right. And the problem comes that when your body is lacking something, your brain interprets that as being hungry.
Yes.
So you could have eaten 10,000 calories, but if you didn't get enough of some important nutrient, your brain is going to tell you, your unconscious brain tells your conscious brain, or whatever the correct psychological terms are for it, that you need to eat more because it's lacking something.
Right.
And that's the pitfall that we fall into. If you eat very, very nutritionally dense foods, and the best of those are vegetables, you don't need to eat that much to satisfy your hunger.
Yeah. There it is. That's huge. I mean, so what I would like to do is get you back, if you're willing, to talk more specifically about nutrition and how that relates to our performance, our health. Inflammation is a topic that definitely needs to be discussing. There's way more to talk about. Hydration levels.
Yes.
So can I get you back again?
Sometime as often as you want.
Good. That's great. Fascinating topic. I can't think of anything that skydivers and other adventure folks need to hear more of, because we're so focused on the actual activity, the gear, the techniques, and that kind of stuff. We get hungry for that, but we're forgetting the fact that our bodies are really critical in terms of how this comes out.
Yeah, and honestly, the most basic analogy that I like to use about that is for people that ride a bicycle. It's a whole lot easier and a whole lot cheaper and a whole lot better to lose 10 pounds on your body than try to make your bike weigh 10 pounds less.
Yeah.
I mean, it costs you $2,000 to make your bike weigh 10 pounds less.
Yeah.
And you're still going to be carrying too much weight on top of your bike.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Of course, increasing your wing loading is easy. It's just beer.
Yes.
Beer and Ben and Jerry's.
That's right. Yeah. Not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah. No, it's not. There's some very nice wake vests out there.
Yes. But yes, we should definitely do another session more specifically on nutrition and how it relates to health.
The whole other component.
And how they all mesh together. Let's do that.
Yeah. This is fun. This is good.
Yeah.
So I want to thank everybody for joining, and for our special guests, David and Maddie Ames.
And, I am available live or on the internet or over the phone if anybody would like to discuss specific needs or exercise programs or nutritional counseling, whether it's a one-time thing or an ongoing thing. I'm certainly available.
Yeah. This is just a tiny little piece of the stuff that David's taught me over the years. And, this is an ongoing conversation that we've been having, well, I guess forever.
Pretty much.
So I want to thank you very, very much for joining, all of you, David in particular. And I look forward to more.